My name is Alan Whitaker. I'm 61 years old, an architect by trade, retired from full-time work but still helping on municipal contracts when the city of Fairfax needs the old dog to dust off his T-square. I've lived a calm life by design, clean lines, stable load-bearing walls, no unnecessary extravagance. Raised Emma, our only daughter, with my wife Janet. We weren't flashy people. But we were there. Always there. And then, one day this past spring, I learned that, being there, was no longer part of the plan. It was a Sunday. The forsythias were starting to bloom out back. I just made coffee, dark roast, freshly ground, 2 mugs, and brought one out to the porch for Janet. She sat with her knees tucked up on the chair, still in her robe, flipping through the paper and skimming real estate listings she'd never call. Emma's name lit up my phone. I smiled. "Hi, Em," I said. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. "Yeah. Everything's fine. Just wanted to talk through some of the wedding stuff." She sounded tight-clipped, like the words were squeezed through a straw. I stood up and stepped off the porch, pacing toward the magnolia tree near the edge of our lawn. My stomach shifted slightly, not from dread, but from some distant recognition that something was off. "Sure," I said carefully. "You know we're here for whatever you need." She took a breath. "Okay. So, Chase and I have decided on Asheville. You know, mountain air, cool venue. We're doing it in June. It's going to be really small. Like, intentionally small." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Asheville made sense, picturesque, trendy, good for Instagram. Emma had always been image-minded. She wasn't superficial, exactly, just calculated. Thoughtful about optics. "That sounds nice," I said. "Will you send us the invite soon?" There was another pause. This one longer. "Dad, this is the part that's kind of delicate." Her voice dropped to a whisper, like she was hiding from her own words. "We're actually not doing parents. At all." I stopped pacing. "Come again?" "No parents. No family. Just friends. We've decided it's going to be a friends-only wedding. No one over 35. I let that hang in the air. She rushed to fill the silence. "It's nothing personal. It's about the vibe. Chase says it's important for us to start our own chapter, without the pressure of family dynamics. No speeches, no awkward dances. Just us and our closest friends." I felt my mouth go dry. "And where does that leave me and your mother?" Emma hesitated. "We'll do a dinner with you guys later. A celebration dinner. A brunch or something. We just don't want to mix circles for the actual day. Chase says it could get messy." Messy. That word landed like a slap. Janet and I had been called many things: supportive, loving, practical, but never messy. Not until Chase, with his gelled hair and startup salary, entered the picture. I kept my voice level. "Well, Emma, it's your day. You can plan it how you want." "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand." Her relief was instant. "But there's one thing I do need." Of course there was. "The venue we want is kind of expensive. They require the deposit to be paid by someone with assets. Like property and good credit. And it has to be signed by the payee. Chase's dad has tax issues, so..." My fingers clenched the phone tighter. "So you want me to pay the deposit?" I said flat. "Just the deposit. It's like $5,000. We'll pay for everything else. The lodge just needs a signature from someone credible." "Credible. Send me the contract," I said and hung up. The email came an hour later. I opened it in my study, the same room where I used to check her homework and pin up her third-grade drawings. The PDF was slick, professional. The venue was called Ridgepine Estate, a modern glass lodge overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains. It looked like something out of a wedding magazine: floor-to-ceiling windows, hanging Edison bulbs, a pergola made of white oak. The contract was in her name and mine. I was the primary renter, which meant, legally, I held the right to modify, reschedule, or cancel. Emma and Chase probably didn't read the fine print. They just wanted the money and my signature. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I signed it. Janet was less composed than I was. "She said what?" she asked, nearly dropping the dish she was drying. "No family. Just friends. We're too old for the vibe, apparently. Janet sat down at the kitchen table and covered her mouth. I saw the hurt in her eyes. The kind of hurt that comes not from anger, but exclusion. But she still wants your money, she said bitterly. Yeah. And you gave it? I did. She shook her head. I don't understand how we raised a daughter who'd do this. I understood. Emma had always been headstrong, focused on presentation. She got that from my mother, a woman who used to change her earrings mid-dinner if someone complimented the wrong pair. Janet stood and paced. She's going to regret this, she muttered. She's going to wake up one day and realize she threw away her family for a few trendy photos. I stared at the contract, now printed and signed, sitting on my desk. I think, I said slowly, we should host a dinner. Same weekend. Janet looked up. A dinner? Family, neighbors, old friends. People who thought they were going to a wedding. Let's not make it about revenge. Let's make it about warmth. We'll call it a celebration dinner. She narrowed her eyes. Alan, what are you planning? I smiled faintly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing scandalous. Just a little reallocation. The next morning, I called Ridgepine and spoke with the site coordinator, a cheerful woman named Lauren. Yes, Mr. Whitaker. You're the primary renter. You're allowed to move the date or request a transfer to one of our other partner venues, as long as we have 30 days' notice. Perfect. I asked for the list of available properties and selected a smaller lodge closer to town, more casual, better parking, and a private dining patio. I picked Saturday evening. Prime time. I didn't cancel the original date. I simply moved the deposit. The silence from Emma over the next few weeks was deafening. No updates. No photos of the dress. No emails about travel plans. I suppose she thought she'd done us a kindness by letting us off the hook. And so, we planned our own gathering. We called it a family supper, and sent out invitations to 25 people, Emma's godparents, my siblings, Janet's college roommate, the neighbors who'd watched Emma grow up. No speeches. No fancy photos. Just dinner, laughter, and people who still valued what family meant. We didn't tell them the full story. Only that Emma had opted for a small, private ceremony, and we wanted to celebrate in our own way. But I made sure of one thing. I told the caterer to prepare enough food for 2 more plates. Just in case. I don't believe in revenge. Never have. Not even in architecture, where some designers build monuments to their ego instead of the community. To me, elegance is restraint. Strength in quiet lines. Let others chase drama. I'll take a steady beam any day. Still, when I moved the deposit, I admit, there was a slight tightness in my chest. Not guilt. Not vindication either. Just a quiet readiness, like laying down rebar under concrete, just in case the weight gets heavier than expected. I didn't tell Emma I'd moved the date. I didn't think I needed to. She hadn't followed up. Not even a, "Thanks, Dad." Not a copy of the guest list. Not a whisper about how things were coming together. I suppose it's easy to forget the foundation once the drapes are up. Janet and I continued with our dinner planning, choosing a modest lodge downtown. We opted for a mix of southern comfort and casual elegance: rosemary chicken, cast iron mac and cheese, local wines, cobbler for dessert. The guest list firmed up quickly. Our neighbors the Clarks were excited. My younger sister, Molly, was flying in from Oregon. Even my old drafting partner, Leon, who had retired to Florida, RSVP'd yes. I told them it was a family celebration supper. I didn't lie, I just let people make their own assumptions. Janet was in charge of flowers. She selected simple arrangements: wildflowers, lavender, baby's breath. I don't want it to feel like we're pretending this is a wedding, she said. But I also don't want it to feel like we've been pushed out of one. I understood. We were building our own space, one where love still mattered more than aesthetics. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine, mostly Emma's Instagram stories, which Janet still quietly checked, that the original venue was being hyped as the dream spot. She posted a moody photo of Ridgepine's glass walls with the caption, "Can't believe this is where we'll say I do, red heart, no drama. No stress. Just us." The irony was almost too clean. They'd planned every filter, every pose, except for the foundation. About 3 weeks out, I received a message from the Ridgepine events coordinator, Lauren. "Hi, Mr. Whitaker, just confirming that we've transferred your original deposit to Willow Creek Lodge for the evening of June 15th, as requested. Please note this officially removes your name from the Ridgepine contract unless a new deposit is placed." "Thank you," I replied with a simple confirmation and asked for a PDF of the new agreement. It came within the hour. I printed it, tucked it in a folder, labeled it, "Supper June 15th, confirmed." Later that evening, I got a text from Emma. "Hey, just checking, you paid the deposit, right? Everything's good with the lodge?" I stared at the message for a moment. Not even a, "Hi, Dad." Just a logistical nudge, like I was a booking agent. I typed slowly. "Hi, Em. Yes, everything's taken care of." She sent back a thumbs up emoji. That was it. I didn't lie. Everything was taken care of. Just not the way she expected. The weeks passed. Spring turned to early summer. The heat settled in, sticky and slow. I found myself thinking more and more about Chase, my soon-to-be son-in-law, I suppose. What kind of man excludes a woman's parents from her wedding? The only memory I had of Chase that truly stuck was from last Thanksgiving. He came late. Wore cologne strong enough to cloud the kitchen. Shook my hand like it was a sales pitch. When I asked him what his plans were after their engagement, he said, "Oh, we'll probably do a year or two of travel, monetize Emma's following, and build the brand." Build the brand. That was the first time I realized he didn't see Emma as a daughter, or even a partner. He saw her as a platform. The idea of a family wedding probably felt like bad optics to him. Too messy. Too sincere. You can't Photoshop sincerity. About 10 days before the wedding, Janet came into my study with her phone. "Look at this," she said, eyes wide. It was a screenshot of a post on the Ridgepine Instagram account. A smiling caption, dated that morning. "Due to scheduling changes, June 15th is now available for booking. One of our prime weekends has reopened. Contact us ASAP to secure your summer dream wedding." Janet looked at me. "They don't know, do they?" I shook my head. "They never checked. Or they assumed everything was fine. Emma must not have followed up. She thinks you handled it." I nodded. "Technically, I did." Janet sat down slowly. "Do you think they're going to find out before the wedding?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I do know they haven't paid for anything else yet. They were counting on the deposit to hold the spot." Janet looked pained. "They're going to be humiliated. Only if they refuse to ask for help." I spent the following week finalizing our supper plans. Invitations were confirmed. Caterers updated. A local jazz duo agreed to play for the evening. We arranged for a single speech, not by me, but by Leon, who insisted on toasting. The kind of love that endures even when it's told it's no longer welcome. I didn't tell him the whole story either. But he knew enough. Emma still hadn't called. But I got a notice from my email server. A document had been forwarded from Ridgepine to another address, Chase's, I assumed, with the subject line: "Rental contract status. Whitaker transfer confirmed." They knew now. I waited. No message came. The night before their wedding, or what was supposed to be their wedding, I slept deeply. Janet did not. In the morning, I woke to find her already dressed, quietly watching her phone over coffee. "They haven't posted anything," she said. "Nothing since yesterday." It was almost noon. Then, at 12:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. Then came the flood of texts. "Dad, what the hell happened? The venue says the contract is void. They won't let us in. We don't have another place. Our guests are on the way. We need you." By 12:45 p.m., I had 23 missed calls. Most from Emma. A few from Chase. One from an unfamiliar number that I assumed was a vendor or guest. I stared at the screen, letting it buzz on the table like a wasp in a jar. Janet sat beside me and said nothing. Finally, I picked up the 24th call. Emma's voice was ragged, panicked. "Dad?'Please. We didn't know you moved it. No one told us. The venue says we need to pay another deposit and all the dates are booked. We don't know what to do. I kept my voice calm. I moved it 6 weeks ago, Em. Didn't you read the agreement? We thought you were just handling it. She snapped. Then her voice softened. Please. We're stranded. We don't have a space. We can't afford a new one. People are flying in. What are we supposed to do? I took a long breath. You're supposed to come to the supper. There was silence. What? I booked Willow Creek for tonight. Same weekend. We're hosting a dinner, family, friends, neighbors. Real people who care about you. There's food, music, chairs. You have 2 plates waiting. You and Chase. Her voice cracked. But it's not a wedding. No, I said. It's better. It's a place where love still means something. She didn't respond. So I added. But there's a condition. If you come, you walk in with apologies. And you treat everyone there with respect. No cameras. No optics. Just honesty. The silence stretched. Then, we'll be there. The supper was already in motion when I got off the phone with Emma. Janet stood by the dining room window, watching the backyard oak sway gently in the breeze. The weather was merciful, mild for a Virginia June, with enough overcast to keep the heat polite. They're coming, I said. Janet turned slowly, her eyes scanning my face. You're sure? I nodded. They've got nowhere else to go. She folded her arms, pressing her fingers to her lips. Should we change anything? No, I said. They'll come as guests, or not at all. It wasn't said with malice. Just resolution. We hadn't planned this supper for them, but we also hadn't planned to exclude them. We had created a space, one they'd chosen to abandon, and now they were crawling back to it, barefoot and panicked. Janet reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. I knew what she was thinking. This wasn't how she imagined seeing her daughter in white. We arrived at Willow Creek Lodge at 4 o'clock. The staff had already arranged the tables under the large patio awning, lanterns strung above like little moons. Long wooden tables, linen runners, mason jars filled with Janet's wildflowers. It felt rustic, intimate, real. The kind of setting where you could look someone in the eye and know you'd be heard. Leon was already there, helping the caterers stack plates. This is good, he said, nodding around. Very grounded. Not too much fuss. You know, Alan, if I'd had a wedding like this, I might not have needed 3 wives. I laughed. But my chest was tight. Every few minutes I checked the gravel driveway. No sign of Emma or Chase. Guests trickled in. The Clarks brought their famous potato salad, unprompted. Molly wore a teal dress she'd bought just for the occasion and kissed Janet's cheek twice, whispering, "We're proud of you." Even Mr. Greeley, our 80-year-old neighbor, came in suspenders and a bow tie, asking if this counted as formal wear. Everyone seemed to understand, without being told, that this was about more than dinner. It was about being seen. And being remembered. At 5:40 p.m., just as the sun began to dip, a silver Honda Civic turned slowly into the gravel lot. Emma stepped out first. She wasn't wearing a wedding dress. Just a plain cream-colored blouse and slacks. Her hair was curled, but the curls had started to fall. She looked tired. Her eyes puffy. Not the glowing bride from Instagram, just a young woman who had been humbled by the real world. Chase got out next. Shirt untucked, face pale. His usual smugness was absent. He looked around like a man entering a courtroom, not a dinner party. They stood at the edge of the lot for a moment, hesitating. Janet didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, Emma walked toward us. Her voice cracked. "Hi, Mom. Dad?" Janet nodded. Emma swallowed. I don't know what to say. I stepped forward, my tone even. "You start with 'I'm sorry.'" She nodded quickly, eyes welling up. I'm so sorry. For everything. For how we treated you. For shutting you out. We thought we knew better. We didn't." She glanced back at Chase. It wasn't just his idea. I let it happen. I was trying so hard to control everything, the guest list, the venue, the mood, and somewhere along the way I forgot the people who built me. Her voice trembled. I didn't just uninvite you from the wedding. I uninvited you from my life. Janet's throat tightened. I could see it. Emma kept going. And then when everything fell apart, when I needed help, you still made space for us. She reached for my hand. Thank you? For saving me from my own arrogance. I looked her in the eyes. And I saw my daughter again, not the curated version, not the girl in filters and hashtags, but the one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during road trips. I nodded. You're welcome. Now come meet your guests. We didn't announce anything formally. There was no microphone, no procession. Just plates filled with food, drinks passed around, and a long wooden table that made room for two more. Emma and Chase sat beside Janet and me. Quiet at first, but slowly warming as the night took on its own rhythm. At one point, Emma leaned in and said, "This is better than anything we planned." I looked at her. That's because this wasn't planned. It was honest. She nodded, biting her lip. I think we forgot what a wedding was for. Leon stood up to give a toast, unprompted, of course. He raised his glass, clearing his throat. This isn't the kind of evening you can put in a photo album. There are no choreographed dances or rented suits. Just people. Just warmth. And in my experience, 3 marriages and a career full of stubborn clients, the only things that last are the ones that aren't built for show. He looked toward Emma. To those who remember their roots. And to those who have the humility to return. Everyone raised their glasses. Emma wiped a tear. After dessert, I stepped away to the edge of the patio, watching fireflies blink over the grass. Chase joined me. We stood in silence for a few beats. Then he said, "I owe you more than just a thank you." I didn't respond. "I treated this like a brand campaign," he admitted. "We curated a ceremony for people we barely knew. And we ghosted the people who made us who we are." He looked me in the eye. "You had every right to let us fail." I turned to him. "I didn't want you to fail," I said. "I just didn't want to finance a fantasy I wasn't allowed to be part of." He nodded. "Fair. Family's not a brand," I added. "It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be real." He swallowed. "I'll do better. I promise." "Don't promise me," I said. "Promise her." At the end of the night, Emma and Chase stood to thank everyone. Emma didn't make a speech. She just went around the table, one by one, hugging each person and saying, "Thank you for being here." When she reached Molly, my sister pulled her into a tight hug and whispered, "Your parents did good, you know." Emma looked over at me. "I know," she said softly. Back at home, long after the guests had gone and the leftovers had been boxed and the flowers wrapped in damp paper towels, I sat on the porch with Janet. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said, "It wasn't the wedding we expected." "No," I said. "It was better." She looked at me. "Do you think they learned something?" "I think they were forced to. Which might be the only way it sticks." We sat there, the cicadas buzzing, the house humming gently behind us. And for the first time in months, I felt still. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just whole. Like a house that had been tested by wind, and still stood. You might think the story ended there, with fireflies and forgiveness and second chances beneath twinkling patio lights. It didn't. The supper was the turning point, yes, but not the final chapter. That kind of deep fracture between parents and children, it doesn't vanish after one night of hugs and homemade cobbler. It settles like sediment. Layered. Heavy. Waiting to be excavated carefully. In the days that followed, Emma called more often. Little things at first. A quick thank you for rescuing the weekend. A short video of Janet dancing with Mr. Greeley at the dinner. A photo of the wildflowers we'd set out. Always something framed in the past tense. As if she was still processing that it had actually happened. One afternoon she called while I was pruning the shrubs. "Hey, Dad." "Hi, Em. Chase and I have been talking. We want to come by. Just for dinner. No occasion. Just us." I paused, wiping sweat off my brow. "Of course," I said. "We'll make something simple." She hesitated. "Can we bring anything?" "Just yourselves," I said. "And maybe some honesty." She chuckled nervously. "We'll try." That Sunday, I made baked ziti and garlic bread. Janet tossed a salad and set out the same blue ceramic plates we'd used since the 90s. Nothing fancy. Just home. Emma and Chase arrived 10 minutes early, already a sign something had shifted. They brought a bottle of wine and a pie. Cherry. Janet opened the door and hugged Emma tightly. You don't need to bring anything, she said, her voice thick. I wanted to, Emma whispered. I wanted it to feel like a step forward. We sat down in the dining room, no cameras, no place cards, no curated playlists. Just clinking forks and conversation. It started light. Weather. Chase's job. Janet's garden. But by the time dessert hit the table, Emma's voice shifted. Dad, she said, can I ask you something? Of course. When did you decide to move the deposit? I looked at her directly. The day I signed the contract. Her eyebrows lifted. Seriously? Yes. I knew from the start what was happening. You were cutting us out. You wanted our support but not our presence. She looked down. I knew that hurt. I continued. But I also knew trying to fight you on it would only push you further away. So I gave you what you asked for, and quietly made sure we weren't left standing in an empty room while you chased something hollow. Emma nodded slowly. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said. I thought I was being independent. You were being curated, I replied. There's a difference. She took a breath. We just wanted everything to look right. We thought if we controlled the photos, the atmosphere, the guest list, we could make it feel perfect. But it ended up feeling fake. And worse, it cost us the people who actually mattered. Chase added quietly. We were embarrassed. That's why we didn't call sooner. Janet reached across the table and touched Emma's hand. Sweetheart, we didn't need you to be perfect. We just needed to be included. Emma wiped her eyes with a napkin. We got so focused on who would ruin the vibe, we didn't realize we became the problem. She looked up at me. Can we try again? The second ceremony wasn't elaborate. They didn't call it a redo. They called it a reckoning. Their word. It was held in our backyard 2 months later. Just 40 people. No professional photographer. Emma wore a simple sundress. Chase wore navy slacks and a white button-down. Janet and I stood beside them, not behind them, as they exchanged vows for the second time, the real ones. This time, they didn't promise perfection. They promised patience, respect, humility. When the guests clapped, I saw Leon wiping his eyes behind his sunglasses. At the reception, a modest picnic with catered barbecue, Emma pulled me aside. We didn't deserve this, she said. I smiled. You didn't. But you chose to grow. And that's rarer than a perfect wedding. She laughed, resting her head on my shoulder. I miss this. I miss you. There was one more moment that sealed everything. It came 3 weeks later, when a thick manila envelope arrived in our mailbox. No return address. Inside was a printed photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was of Janet and me at the supper. She was laughing, one hand on my shoulder. I was mid-smile, holding a fork. Might I ask you? It wasn't posed. It wasn't perfect. The lighting was dim and warm. The kind of photo that feels like memory, not advertisement. Written on the back in Emma's handwriting. This should have been in our wedding album. I get it now. Love, E. Janet framed it and set it on the bookshelf next to Emma's baby photo. Sometimes we forget that parenting doesn't stop at 18. It doesn't stop at college or at engagement announcements. It doesn't stop when they ask you to step back. Sometimes it starts again, when they realize how far they wandered. I've had people ask me since, weren't you mad? Weren't you tempted to let them suffer? And the honest answer is yes. For a moment. But then I remembered the foundations I spent my life designing, in buildings and in people. A good foundation doesn't get even. It holds firm. It waits. It lets the structure fall apart if it has to, knowing the frame will be there when the rest comes home. That's what fatherhood is, in the end. Not control. Not performance. But the quiet promise of presence. Even when you're uninvited. It's strange, the way a single choice, or lack of one, can echo across a life. A dinner skipped. A door closed. A name crossed off a list. You think you're just making a decision about one day, one moment. But life doesn't work like that. People remember where they weren't wanted. And sometimes, where they were forgiven. After the second ceremony, the backyard one, with mismatched chairs and a yellow jacket that wouldn't leave the cake alone, things slowly started to change. Not just between us and Emma, but in how Emma and Chase moved through the world. You could see it in how they walked into rooms. Less curated. More present. No more of that tight, rehearsed look in the eyes the one people wear when they're building a brand instead of living a life. The neighbors noticed too. Especially the Clarks next door. Sue Clark, who'd been Emma's Girl Scout leader in the 3rd grade, caught me by the mailbox one morning. "She seems different," she said, nodding toward the street where Emma and Chase were helping unload a donation truck for a local church event. "She is," I said. Sue hesitated. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but what she did, with the wedding, that hurt people around here. Not just you two." I nodded slowly. "I know." "She didn't just leave her parents out," Sue continued. "She left us all out. We all watched her grow up. Sat in bleachers for her recitals. Fed her cookies. And then it was like we didn't exist." I sighed. "She's trying," I said. "She's learning. She got lost in the digital noise." Sue looked at me. "Think she'll come to the block picnic next month?" I smiled. "She'll be there. I'll make sure of it." And she was. In late August, when the annual Summer's End block picnic unfolded across 2 cul-de-sacs, Emma and Chase showed up with homemade peach salsa and a folding table. Not a store-bought dip. Not a brand new cooler with their initials monogrammed on it. Just a dish from their own kitchen and a willingness to stand under the same sun as everyone else. Janet and I watched from our lawn chairs as Emma helped the Fergusons set up the grill. Chase handed out lemonade. He even fixed the extension cord for the speaker setup without being asked. They were present. When Emma finally sat down beside me, wiping her forehead, she looked around and whispered, "I didn't realize how many people we'd pushed away." I looked at her sideways. "You were looking in the wrong direction." She nodded. "I thought weddings were supposed to be about perfect beginnings," she said. "But maybe they're really about acknowledging all the imperfect people who helped you get there." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Later that week, Emma invited me to speak at the local college where she'd been volunteering part-time. She was co-organizing a small community leadership event and said the group needed someone who understood architecture, structure, and legacy. I told her I didn't do speeches much anymore. She said, "You do them all the time, just not with a microphone." I went. It was a modest lecture hall. 25 students, a few teachers, and Emma sitting near the back, watching me like she used to when I helped her build scale models for school. I talked less about buildings and more about blueprints, for character, for relationships, for things meant to last. I told them, "Sometimes you'll be asked to fund something you're not invited to. Sometimes you'll be sidelined while your name is still on the paperwork. And sometimes you'll have to decide whether your love is conditional or structural." Emma teared up. I didn't call her out. But later, as the students filtered out, she hugged me longer than usual. Chase and we were slower. Men often are, I suppose. We didn't have a single breakthrough conversation. No dramatic scene on the porch. Just a string of shared tasks, fixing Emma's leaky sink, replacing a warped deck board at their townhouse, reviewing Chase's resume when he wanted to pivot from marketing into nonprofit strategy. "We want to do more than sell things," he told me one day. "We want to serve people. Build something that matters." That was the first time he used "we," like a team instead of a brand. "You'll never get rich doing that," I said. He grinned. "Good. Maybe we'll stop confusing money with value." Progress. In early October, Emma invited us over for dinner. Her first time hosting. No occasion. Just Tuesday. She made risotto. It was a little undercooked, but nobody mentioned it. Chase played old Motown on the record player they found at a thrift store. They'd started collecting used things with scratches and stories, instead of ordering curated sets online. Their apartment still had white walls, but now there were bookshelves with titles like The Art of Neighboring and Slow Living. As we finished dessert, a somewhat lopsided lemon tart. Emma raised a glass. "I never made a toast at either of my weddings," she said. Everyone laughed. "But tonight I want to." She looked around the table, just the four of us, and said, "Thank you for giving us space to fail. And then still setting a place at the table when we came back." I nodded. She raised her glass higher. "To foundations. The kind that don't crack, even when the whole damn structure shakes." We clinked glasses. It was the most honest toast I'd ever heard. Back home that night, Janet and I sat quietly on the porch. She sipped her tea and smiled. "We made it through," she said. I nodded. "Barely." She chuckled. "Do you think we were too soft? Too forgiving?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said. "We were a house with the lights on." They came back when the rest of the power went out. Janet reached over, squeezed my hand. We sat there until the moon rose and the cicadas quieted down. A still night. A full heart. And no regrets. You can't predict how your children will turn out. You build them as best you can, with patience, structure, the best materials you've got. You pour yourself into them. But at some point, they become their own contractors. They draw their own plans. Sometimes they tear down the whole frame and try something new. You can scream at them from the blueprint. Or you can keep the porch light on. Just in case. Fall came early that year. The air cooled before the leaves turned, and by mid-October, our street in Fairfax looked like something from a postcard. Trees lit up in fiery reds and deep oranges, porches stacked with pumpkins, the smell of chimney smoke drifting lazily in the air. Janet spent her afternoons baking, not for an event, not for guests, just because she felt like filling the house with warmth. I raked leaves, fixed creaky porch steps, oiled the tools in the garage. Life had settled into something gentle again. Then one morning Emma called. "Dad," she said, "I'm thinking of quitting my job." I stood in the driveway, holding my coffee, watching a squirrel stare me down from the fence. "Oh? I want to do something different. Something that actually matters." I leaned against the car. "What does different mean to you?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I know what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean optimizing ad campaigns for makeup brands I don't even use. It doesn't mean selling a life that I don't live." She paused. "I think I want to work with people. Maybe start a program for young women, about digital self-esteem, boundaries, confidence. Real stuff." I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. "Sounds like your mother," I said. Emma laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." She hesitated. "Do you think I'm too late to change course?" I took a breath. "You're not too late, Em. You're finally building with the right materials." Later that week, she and Chase came over for lunch. They brought a folder. "I want to show you something," she said, sitting across from me at the table. "We've been working on this together." Inside were early plans, sketches, outlines, post-it notes, for a nonprofit. It would be called the Unfiltered Project. The goal was simple: help teens navigate the gap between their online identity and their real lives. Partner with schools. Host workshops. Create a safe space for conversations about validation, comparison, and self-worth. They didn't have a business model yet. Or funding. Just an idea. But the passion was real. Raw. And for the first time, I saw Emma creating something not for clicks, but for legacy. She glanced up. "Will you help us?" "Just with the foundation, the legal side, maybe some grant stuff." I smiled. "Let me guess. You need someone credible to put their name on the documents." Chase winced. "That came out wrong the first time." Emma laughed. "It really did." I leaned back in my chair. "This time," I said, "it's my honor." Helping Emma start the Unfiltered Project reminded me of my early days as an architect, drafting plans late into the night, adjusting for reality, learning that no blueprint survives first contact with real materials. We set up the nonprofit structure. Connected with a lawyer I knew from my city planning days. Found a pro bono accountant to help. Janet even hosted a small fundraiser in our backyard. Nothing fancy, just chili, cornbread, and a mason jar for donations. We raised $2,000 that night and booked their first workshop at the community center. Emma was nervous. What if no one comes? She asked the night before. They'll come, I said. You've got something real now. People crave that more than you know. 23 girls showed up that Saturday morning. Middle schoolers. High schoolers. A few moms, too. Emma stood at the front of the room, not in heels or stage makeup, but in jeans and a cardigan. Chase ran the tech from the back, slides, music, coffee. They didn't pitch perfection. They told the story. Not just about the wedding, but everything around it, the filters, the branding, the emotional distance. How it cost them more than they expected. And how choosing truth over performance saved their relationships. At the end, one girl raised her hand and asked, "Was it hard to admit you messed up?" Emma nodded. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done." Then she looked toward the back of the room, where I was standing, and said, "But my dad taught me something. He showed me that being steady isn't the same as being weak. That holding space for someone to return is braver than shutting the door." I swallowed hard. She smiled. "And that sometimes you don't need revenge. You just need a table with an extra seat." The program grew from there. Within months, they had 5 schools on board and a modest grant from a local civic group. Emma stepped away from her job completely. Chase followed a few months later, taking on the nonprofit's operations full-time. They moved into a smaller apartment, downsized their wardrobe, sold the extra car. And they were happier. Not louder. Not more glamorous. Just lighter. One evening, Emma came by alone. We sat on the porch, the sky fading to pink. "I never asked," she said. "Why didn't you just cancel the deposit? Let us fall flat?" I looked out across the lawn, where the grass had just been cut. "Because you're my daughter," I said. "And because my job was never to control your path. Just to make sure you could still get home if you lost it." She nodded, eyes glassy. "And because part of you knew we'd come back?" "No," I said. "I didn't know. I just hoped." We sat in silence a while longer. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside, updated bylaws for the Unfiltered project. A new board member had been added. My name. "Your seat at the table," she said softly. That winter, we spoke at a conference together. Father and daughter. The topic was legacy. I told the audience, "You don't get to choose how your kids interpret your love. But you can choose to make it solid. Quiet. Immovable. Like steel buried beneath the surface." Emma followed, telling the now polished version of the wedding story, not with shame, but clarity. Honesty. Growth. Afterward, a woman in her 50s came up to us, crying. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years," she said. "But maybe I need to just keep the porch light on." Emma held her hand. "That's the hardest part," she said. "But the most powerful." There was no fairy tale ending. Just days and weeks, choices and forgiveness, new boundaries and new beginnings. The Unfiltered project didn't go viral. It just helped people. Quietly. One room at a time. Emma and Chase didn't become influencers. They became adults. And Janet and I didn't get the wedding we once dreamed of. But we got something better. We got to witness our daughter build a life with depth. Humility. Truth. A structure that might actually last. I've always believed that life is like a structure. You can spend years designing it, calculating weight and load, picking the finest materials, and still, something will shift. A storm will come. The ground will tremble. A window will crack. But if you built it right, the frame holds. That's what I learned being an architect. And even more so, being a father. It's been almost a year now since that wedding that wasn't. Since the Ridge Pine Lodge emptied on a Saturday afternoon and a dinner in downtown Virginia took its place. Since 23 missed calls led to something stronger than a ceremony, a reckoning, a return, a rediscovery. And in that year, I've watched my daughter become a woman I hadn't realized she still had inside her. Emma has now led 12 workshops for the Unfiltered project. They've expanded into mentoring, one-on-one sessions with teenage girls who feel lost in a world of likes and expectations. Chase handles most of the administrative load, and he's good at it. He no longer talks about brand management. He talks about impact. I visit their office sometimes. It's nothing more than 2 desks and a couch in a shared workspace above a bike shop. But it's real. Tangible. There's hand-drawn posters from students on the walls. A coffee pot that's seen better days. A bulletin board with thank you notes pinned like medals. Last week, a girl named Myra came up to me after a session and said, "Your daughter helped me delete 5 apps off my phone. She says I'm allowed to be seen without a filter." I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from the marrow, not the mouth. "She learned that the hard way," I said. Myra tilted her head. "She said you taught her." I paused. "Maybe," I said. But she was the one who came home. Janet and I live a quieter life now. Not in the sense of isolation, but in peace. The kind of quiet that doesn't beg for attention. The kind that holds space. Sometimes people from town ask if I miss work, the late nights, the drafting tables, the smell of sawdust and ink. Truth is, I still draw. Not for clients anymore. Just for myself. Lately, I've been sketching houses. Not blueprints. Concepts. Places that feel lived in. Imperfect porches. Scuffed floorboards. I don't know why. Maybe I'm trying to make sense of what we built here, with Emma, with our family. Or maybe I'm just sketching the home we found again. Janet thinks I should compile them. Call it Structures of Grace, she said the other day, handing me a mug of tea. Not a bad title. In March, Emma and Chase celebrated their first real anniversary. Not the date of the original wedding that never happened, but the supper. That dinner under lanterns and doubt, the night they came back with humility and left with something much greater than good photos. They invited the same people who came that night: Molly, the Clarks, Leon, Mr. Greeley, now 81 and still showing up in a bow tie. They hosted it in our backyard again. They did all the planning this time. Emma cooked. Chase grilled. They set out printed menus that said, "There are tables you set for appearances. And tables you set for people." We finally learned the difference. It was handwritten. That night, as the guests mingled and ate and shared stories, Emma pulled me aside. "Dad," she said, "we want to tell you something." I followed her to the edge of the yard, where Janet had planted lilacs. Chase stood there, hands folded. Emma smiled. "Nervous. We're going to be parents." The words didn't land immediately. It was like being told your favorite song had been re-recorded in a new key, familiar, but breathtaking all over again. Janet gasped behind me and started crying. I stood there, frozen, then finally managed. "You sure?" Emma laughed. "About the baby or about telling you?" "Both. We're sure." I hugged her, tighter than I had in years. And just like that, the house grew again. Weeks later, Emma and I sat in the nursery. She was painting one wall a muted blue-green. The crib still in the box. Chase was in the other room assembling a dresser. She looked over her shoulder at me. "What kind of father do you think I'll be raising this kid with?" I chuckled. "Well, he's already proven he knows how to get humbled." She smiled. "But really," she said, "do you think we'll mess them up?" I thought about it for a long moment. "You'll mess up something," I said. "We all do. But it's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about what you do after. If you build a strong enough foundation, you can repair just about anything." Emma set the paintbrush down and walked over to sit beside me. "You know, sometimes I still cringe when I think about what we did. The exclusion. The assumptions. That text, asking you to pay but not show up, it plays in my head sometimes, like a bad chorus." I looked at her. "Good. Let it play. Not to punish yourself, but to remember the sound of misalignment. So you know when something's off in your own house one day." She nodded. "I'll keep the porch light on too," she whispered. "The baby was born in late fall. A boy. They named him Reed Allen, Reed for strength, Allen for legacy. When I held him in my arms the first time, he was barely a breath, tiny fingers, a scrunched red face, all potential." Emma watched me with wet eyes. "I want him to grow up knowing the difference between performance and presence," she said. I looked down at the boy, so impossibly small. "Then keep showing up," I said. "Even when it's hard?" "Especially when it's hard." She nodded. And that was that. Now, every Sunday afternoon, They bring Reed by for lunch. Janet coos and sings to him. I take him out on the porch and hum old hymns while he sleeps in my arms. There are no filters. No curated moments. Just real life. One day, when he's older, we'll tell him the story of the wedding that wasn't, and the dinner that saved everything. We'll teach him that it's okay to make mistakes. But it's not okay to run from them. We'll show him what it means to hold a table open, even when it hurts. And I'll tell him what I wish someone had told me when I was 30. The strongest house isn't the one with the best design. It's the one that stays standing when the world forgets it. I used to think being a father meant making sure everything went according to plan. Now I know it means being steady when the plan falls apart. Not controlling the outcome, but anchoring the possibility. Not demanding gratitude, but modeling grace. And maybe if you do it right, one day your child will invite you not because you paid, but because they finally understand who held the frame up when it was buckling. So yes, I was the father uninvited to the wedding. But I was also the one who moved the deposit. Who set the table. Who stayed. And in the end, that made all the difference.